Did you know by planting a pollinator-friendly garden, you can increase your fruit and vegetable yields? They make great companions. Most of these are good for food and medicinal purposes, and they can improve the soil conditions. I'll be going over the most important reasons why you should plant a pollinator garden, my favorite plants and their uses, how you can incorporate them into your garden and homestead, and how I personally use them. Bee balm is one of my favorite plants in the garden for all of its benefits for us and the pollinators. Bees and hummingbirds particularly love bee balm. The blooms are quite beautiful, adding a nice splash of color in the vegetable garden. It's deer resistant because of its aromatic foliage, so if you have deer in your area, then this just might be the plant for you. Bee balm is a great crop to interplant with your vegetables because it brings in the pollinators. It likes the same conditions that your vegetables do, rich and moist soil. It is a perennial and it needs a permanent home. And I actually like to put all of my perennials on the edges of all my beds. Bee balm can be invasive in some areas and some cultivars are more aggressive than others, but we've never had a problem with bee balm here. It does spread, but it is totally manageable. It's from the Lamiaceae family, which is the mint family. It has some great medicinal benefits too. It has a strong essential oil that contains antimicrobial properties. It's an antioxidant and it helps combat oxidative stress. Bee balm has a calming effect and it can help people relax at night or even sleep better. I love to take the open blooming flowers and just infuse them in honey for winter use, for colds, flus, and even sore throats. I take the flowers and let them sit out for an hour or so on the counter to wilt, releasing some of the water, and put it right directly into the honey and let it sit for a month or so. You can use that infused honey in teas or even a spoonful of it to help relieve colds, flus, and that sore throat. It works wonders. The flowers and leaves are also great infused in oils to make salad dressings. When I'm using it this way, I'm not only adding flavor, but I'm also adding medicinal benefits. This old-fashioned plant you may not even think as a pollinator plant, but the bees love it. Solitary bees, bumblebees, and honeybees. Some people like me absolutely love it, but others not so much. It drops its seeds and it will grow in the worst of soils. It's hollyhocks. This old-fashioned flower is loaded with pollen and it will grow just about anywhere. I have them planted under a split rail fence in front of the shop right next to the road. The soil here couldn't be any worse. They get no fertilizer and little water, and it's a hot location. They would definitely grow larger if they did receive water and some fertilizer. But they're tough, and the amount of pollen each flower offers is pretty astonishing. Hollyhocks have deep tap roots, which help break up compacted soil. It helps with aeration and water filtration, and it helps with all the other plants that are planted within that same area. And it adds some height while giving this little spot a bit of old-fashioned feeling. Nepeta attracts all pollinators. Its common name is cat mint. It's not the same as catnip, but it still attracts cats all the same. It has delicate blue, purple, or white flower spikes. It's easy to grow in containers or in the ground. It's an excellent companion plant for your vegetable garden and even your flower gardens. It repels aphids and attracts beneficial insects like the parasitic wasp. It's also a perennial and will grow in most soils, and it's somewhat drought tolerant. It too is deer resistant. It'll grow in full sun, even in our climate, and it'll tolerate some shade. Cat mint is very calming and a slight sedative. It's great for helping calm your nerves. It makes a nice minty tea flavor. It is in the mint family, but I've never found it to be invasive. After it blooms, I give it a pretty good haircut, and this one's just about there. By cutting it back, it'll send up another flush of blooms, and maybe even a third if I cut it back again. And this also keeps it from getting too scraggly looking. Next on my pollinator plant list is Agastache. It's also known as hummingbird mint or hyssop. Over the years, I keep adding this plant to my vegetable garden, flower gardens, and containers for a really good reason. It blooms from late spring all the way till we have our first frost, and it needs little deadheading, making it a really easy, low-maintenance plant to grow. They come in a variety of colors, from reds to corals to pinks to even this bluish purple color. This bluish purple color variety requires a little bit more water than the other colors do. This particular variety here, called Sunset, has a much smaller leaf structure, and it's more of a grayish color, and that kind of indicates that it's more drought tolerant. The leaves of all of these Agastache plants are incredibly fragrant, making them deer, squirrel, and chipmunk resistant. Agastache likes southern Utah soils, which is generally fairly low in fertility. It's drought tolerant, it loves the sun, it likes the heat, and it's great grown in containers. I've read that Agastache deters the cabbage looper moth, but what I've seen, that doesn't seem to work for me. But what I have seen is it does attract lots of hummingbirds, butterflies, and bees. It's also in the mint family, and it spreads through dropping its seeds. Once in a while, I'll have an Agastache plant pop up here and there, but I consider it a gift. Traditionally, Agastache was used to treat burns by making a poultice. The leaves were combined with licorice root to help with bronchitis, to help clear those lungs. I like to dry the leaves and make a tea out of it. I combined it with peppermint as well as rose petals. This also helps aid with digestion. It's so easy and beautiful to grow, even in those dry, hot climates. If you know much about me, then you probably knew I was going to bring this plant up, Yarrow. It's a great pollinator plant, and it's packed full of medicinal benefits. Yarrow is a perennial that has deep taproots with the ability to bring up nutrients from deep within that soil, particularly phosphorus and copper, making it available for the plants that grow all around it. I like to use the leaves as a mulch around my vegetable plants. This provides them with potassium, phosphorus, and calcium, making the soil more nutrient dense and rich. It also helps keep that moisture in. You could also make a tea with these leaves, providing the same type of nutrients. Yarrow is a styptic, meaning it has the ability to stop bleeding, making it a perfect first aid plant. You can take the leaves and macerate them up until the juices start to come out and put it right on that wound to stop it from bleeding. I've used a strong tea to flush out wounds so that they don't get infected. But if the wound was to get infected, you could actually use that tea to flush out that infection as well. Yarrow makes an excellent healing salve. You can infuse the flowers and leaves in witch hazel and use it as a mosquito repellent as well. Yarrow has so many health benefits that I could go on and on. But that's for another video another time. Bachelor Button is an annual that reseeds itself in my garden every year. It has a flat landing surface, making it excellent for a place for those pollinators to land. One of the biggest pollinators that we see on the Bachelor Button is hoverflies. They love the bright colors. And when Bachelor Button goes to seeds, the birds take advantage of that. Bachelor Button flowers are edible. I like to dry the flowers and add them to my herbal teas. Not only do they taste good, but they add a pretty splash of color. Sow your Bachelor Buttons in the early spring. They do a lot better when you direct sow than they do from a transplant. Zinnias are a bright, happy, super easy pollinator plant to grow. I start mine in June by direct sowing the seed in several patches all over my garden. Milkweed is a favorite of the monarch butterfly, but what happens in our zone is the milkweed blooms long before the monarchs arrive. But when they do arrive in the fall, they find that nectar from the zinnias. However, the milkweed flowers are available when the swallowtail arrives. Other pollinator plants that I like to grow in the garden are sunflowers. I like to use the stalks to grow my cucumbers up, especially the sour gherkin, because they're just a little bit smaller. They're also great to grow your bush beans up or other vining crops. I like to plant sunflowers scattered throughout the garden. This offers the plants that grow underneath them a little bit of a relief from the sun during the hot summer. This is especially good for hot climates like ours. The finches love to eat the leaves, and the flowers are great pollinators for the bees. What would the list be without lavender? Lavender likes well-drained soil. We have a lot of clay here, but I can actually get away with planting it in our clay soil as long as I don't overwater it. Once it's established, I might water it about once every 2 weeks during the heat of the summer. If the soil stays moist too long, then the roots can rot. It doesn't really require rich soil, and it tolerates our alkali soil. We grow the English varieties here, and they're very hardy to our Zone 8. I've grown the Spanish varieties, but they just don't seem to thrive in our area, probably because it's too alkali. There's a French variety, and it does really well, but we have to grow it as an annual in our zone. After lavender blooms, then give it a good haircut so that it'll send up a second bloom. We dry lots of lavender flowers for medicinal and culinary uses. I love the flowers infused in lemonade. Culinary sages and ornamental salvias are excellent pollinator-friendly plants. They generally have the purple flowers, and that's what bees really love. Many vegetables require the pollination from bees, like your cucumbers, squash, and melons. While you could pollinate these crops by hand, it's very time-consuming, and we don't do near as good of a job as God's creatures do. Bee-pollinated fruits are oftentimes more numerous and larger. By planting pollinator-friendly plants alongside or around the perimeters of the garden will invite all the precious pollinators into the garden, increasing yields. If you're confused on which pollinator plants to plant, then think diversity, diversity, diversity. The truth is, you'll encourage a balanced garden with an overall reduction in pests and an improvement in the number and diversity of pollinating beneficial insects simply by ensuring that your garden is as diverse as possible. Adequate pollination leads to a higher fruit set, and proper pollination results in better quality fruits and vegetables with more uniform shape, size, and even flavor. Overall, the presence of pollinator plants in and around your food growing areas is essential for maximizing food production, supporting a healthy ecosystem, and ensuring sustainable agriculture long term. Remember, care for and be grateful for our precious pollinators. May God bless you and your family.